Alright, so here is part 2 of our sound devices and figurative language notes. The second part is those specific figurative language devices or figurative devices. So let's get going. The first one is a simile, which is hopefully a review. A simile is a comparison of two unlike things using like, as, than, or even sometimes resembles. Like and as, though, are the most commonly used for a simile. So your example here, he stormed into the classroom like a tornado. So we're comparing the boy to a tornado. We also want to think sometimes when you're looking at these figurative devices, what is the poet or the author trying to say? So for example, what are we trying to say about this boy that stormed into the classroom like a tornado? Probably that he was, maybe he's angry or he's upset, and that's why he's coming in making a big mess, or coming in and maybe shouting or whatever, causing maybe some distress, just like a tornado does to the environment. Next is a metaphor, which is very similar to a simile. However, what makes a metaphor different is that it's a direct comparison of two unlike things. So it's pretty much, it's calling one thing another. An example here says, all the world's a stage and we are merely players. So Shakespeare here was comparing the world to a stage, and we, the people, are players. So he's saying the world is like a stage and the people in the world are like the performers on the stage. Okay? So he's not saying the world is like a stage, he's saying the world is a stage, which is what makes it a metaphor. So an extended metaphor then is a metaphor that goes over several lines or maybe even the entire length of a work. So our example here says, run on the track like Jesse Owens, broke the record flown without any knowing that my wordplay run the 400-meter relay. Now, this is a comparison that goes beyond just one line of the lyrics. Okay, so we're comparing this person to Jesse Owens, and it goes over 3 lines, that comparison. So that's what makes it extended. If you do need help, you want to look a little bit more at extended metaphors, there's a link right here. You'll have to go to the actual slides in order to click on it, but it'll bring you to a resource that can explain extended metaphors in a little bit more detail. Personification is giving non-human things human characteristics. For example, in Michael Jackson's Thriller, he says you start to freeze as horror looks you right in the eyes. So horror is not alive, but Michael Jackson is giving it human characteristics by saying it looks you right in the eyes. Okay? Hyperbole is an extreme exaggeration. It's often used to emphasize something. For example, I could sleep for a year. You might need some rest, but it's impossible to actually sleep for a year. It's exaggerating how tired you are. Same thing here. This book weighs a ton. A ton is 2,000 pounds. A book, you're exaggerating that it's a heavy book. It doesn't actually weigh 2,000 pounds. Litotes are pretty much the opposite of hyperbole. It's an understatement. Often when you see a litote, it's being ironic. So an example would be calling a slow-moving person speedy. Okay, they're not actually speedy. They're the opposite of that. Or naming your pet chihuahua Killer. Okay, you're exaggerating, not to make it bigger, but to make it smaller, if that makes sense. An idiom is an expression where the literal meaning of the words is not the meaning of the expression. It means something other than what it actually says. So idioms are very much a part of a specific language. That's why sometimes it's hard to learn a different language, because each one has, different idioms. For example, it's raining cats and dogs. That just means, it's raining very heavily. But if someone didn't understand that, they would think that you're crazy.
if you said that right, but you understand that it's an idiom. It's an expression that means it's raining very heavily. Same thing, I've got a frog in my throat. It means your throat is sore. You don't actually have a frog living in your throat. A cliche is an expression that has become stale from too much use. Cliches in writing or speech are generally considered a mark of inexperience or unoriginality. So oftentimes, actually, idioms can be seen as cliches. Some more examples: as old as dirt, worth their weight in gold, fast as lightning. These are expressions that are used so often that they're not original. They're not. They don't stand out in writing. A symbol is an object, person, action, or situation that represents more than itself. Okay, so some examples on here. A dove represents peace. The eagle represents freedom, especially, in America. A snake often represents evil. A heart represents love. A lamb represents innocence. Symbols can be seen all over. Their colors, their objects, like roses, those also represent love. So it's just a matter of looking at those objects in a different way and thinking about why did the poet include this? What could it possibly represent? So a little bit more practice with symbol. This poem is called Wild Asters by Sarah Teasdale. And if you read it over, she talks about spring and daisies in the first stanza. These symbolize youth, of growing up. The spring is the start of, the new seasonal year, and daisies sprout up. So these are representing youth, the poet's youth. Whereas in the second stanza, she starts talking about brown fields and barren and autumn. These symbolize aging. Okay, things are starting to die, and they are browning, just like in the stanza. So then also when you're thinking about how the fields and autumn symbolize aging or growing up, you can think about the approach of death. So, as you're aging and eventually, everybody does die, that could be symbolized by winter. Because, in the winter, all of, the plants and the trees and everything, that all dies. So that can symbolize that stage of life as well. So this is a really good example of symbolism, this poem. Next is allusion. The word allusion comes from the verb allude, which means to refer to. So the definition of allusion is a reference to something famous. It could be a painting, a movie, a book, a poem. Anything famous that is referenced is an allusion. So our example over here in blue is from Snowbound, which is a poem. And it says, "A tunnel walled and overlaid with dazzling crystal. We had read of rare Aladdin's wondrous cave, and to our own his name we gave." So this is an allusion to Aladdin and his cave, okay? I'm sure many of you have seen the Disney movie of Aladdin. It's also a very old story. But the point here is that this poem is alluding to Aladdin. Imagery is just, in general, language that appeals to the senses. Most of the time, imagery is visual, so you can, picture in your head. But it can also appeal to sound, touch, taste, smell. But imagery pretty much is drawing pictures in your mind when you're reading the words. So your example down here says, "Then with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather." So specifically this part right here about the cracked hands, you can visualize that in your mind. This is a lot of time where those sensory details, like we talked about in language arts, come into play. Finally, parody, which I think
90% of you got right on that pre-test we took way back when. Parody is a work created to mock, comment on, or make fun of an original work, its subject, author, style, or some other target by means of humorous imitation. Now, you don't need to write this entire definition. Paraphrase it. Put it into your own words so that you don't have to write that big, long sentence. So, an example here, this is a very famous painting, and here, and here we have minions recreating it. So it's making fun of a little bit this poem in a humorous way. On the next slide here, we have two other examples of parody. This first one is Ariana Grande. It's a parody of Problem with cats in it. And the second one is a parody of Fancy with dogs in it. So if you would like to watch that, you can go ahead and on my website, where the link is for the hard copy, or the slides, where the slides are, you can go ahead and find that in there if you would like to watch them. They're just another funny example of parody. Okay. That is it for sound devices and figurative language. Remember, if you have questions, be sure to ask, or if you need to go back and look at anything, do that. On the agenda will be your assignment. It'll probably be in Google Classroom to practice identifying these different figurative devices. All right.